Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back with another chapter reading of Shattered Dreams. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into chapter 26. Our enjoyment of my wonderful new house in Colonia Nicholas Bravo was, as usual, short-lived. We were on the move again. Joel's entire mountain utopia turned out to be a monstrous fiasco. Within a couple of years, all the projects failed. Even our cows were fed so poorly that some had to be held up in slings in order to eat the dry grass and old beans on which we forced them to survive. So he's a prophet. This is supposed to be a utopia. These men are being sent overseas to pour into this utopia. This is supposed to help create all these things just to then have it not happen. Just for her to get a house built out there and go through all that stuff, and she can't even enjoy it because now she has to go. This chapter's starting out great already. After just 5 months in my new house, Verlin sold it, along with Charlotte's 3-bedroom home. I sold a few of my other prized possessions to obtain what little cash we took with us. I left my precious washer and furniture with a friend from church, trusting her to send me cash as soon as she returned to the States. As it turned out, her husband forbade her to pay me because Verlin still owed him for an old debt the rest of us had all forgotten. So I basically lost everything and had to start over from scratch. Although the men failed at their enterprises, we took many good memories away from the mountains with us. I made wonderful friends among the Mexican people. Many of them lamented with us, expressing their grief to see us leaving. While we'd been with them, we were able to help them in so many ways. I often shared my food and clothing, counseling them as needed, and my Spanish improved tremendously. The already strange and depressing circumstances of my family life, however, became even more absurd. I now had 8 living children and shared Verlin with 4 other wives, all as if that wasn't challenging enough. Verlin's growing loyalty to the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Times. Oh, that's a real name. Sounds like something you would see on the TV show. We're going to the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Time. His commitment to the church now seemed to dictate our every movement and decision. I simply had no idea of how good I had it up till now. So she thought that she had it good up till now, which means her circumstances are about to get even worse than they were before. Joel felt inspired by God to form a new colony. So Verlin gave us orders to pick up and move to Baja California, Mexico. Land was purchased, some of which was beachfront property, and those involved hoped this would be a place of refuge for our church members. The 5 LeBaron brothers who participated in the venture considered the new Baja colony to be an ideal location where each family could have self-sustaining little piece of its own. Joel proclaimed the climate to be exactly what we needed. Plants practically grow by themselves from the moisture of the ocean breezes. Goats and bees thrive there. It is a land of milk and honey. Each man can sit under his own vine and fig tree, as the ancient prophet Isaiah predicted. Like most of his dreams, Joel's big plans for the Baja colony were never fully realized, but at first, as always, we all tried our best to believe and be excited. Joel set an example by immediately digging several wells on the property. He set up small pumps powered by monstrous plywood flank-like windmills. In Spanish, they were called molinos, so the new colony was soon known as Los Molinos. In Las Vegas, Verlin purchased used trailer homes he and Joel hauled to Baja and put on our designated lots. Many other families purchased used tents from the Army surplus store to live in until their homes could be built. As compensation for having to move from my new home in the mountains, I noted that Baja was only a 5-hour drive from San Diego. We were in the free zone, in which the U.S. products could be imported without any problems or duty expenses. It was also close enough so that men could work in the States during the week and then come home to be with their families on weekends. With these incentives to spur me on, I dared to hope for a better life and improvement in our economic circumstances. Charlotte was again living with Verlin in Las Vegas when Lucy and I made the move. Why is she the only one who always gets to do this? That would cause problems in my mind, but whatever. Our trip from the mountains to Baja was even more miserable than my move to the mountains from Colonia LeBaron. Naturally, Verlin was too busy to take us himself. He asked a friend, Joe Martson, to move us along with his own wife and teenage son in his 6-passenger van. 17 of us traveled over 20 hours, jammed into this van with our scant belongings. 17 people in a 6-passenger van. What in the world? For my bunch, I got to take a basket of dishes, a few quilts, 2 changes of clothes per person, and my precious radio. I was sick about having to leave behind my crib, dresser, and the gas stove Verlin gave me when I had the fever. Just keeping everyone alive in that van was a miracle. Realizing the incredible stress we were all under, Joe drove fast, as fast and as safe as he could, up and down and around the hills and across the bumpy roads. People started getting car sick, and almost as soon as we started, we had to stop every few miles to take a breather and get up enough courage to continue. I'll never forget how 10-year-old Donna, sick from vomiting, laid down on the road beside the van during one stop and begged me not to force her back inside. 20 hours stretched into 26. You know what selfish is? He's always demanding these type of moves and stuff, and he's not even there to help assist or to try to get another friend to help assist. Because what about that sounds reasonable, that you're stuffing all these people in that? It's more than 2 times the amount that is designed for. By the time we arrived, my fear of hell vanished. We found our land of promise to be a flea-infested desert with undeveloped sand dunes and salt flats close to the ocean. After our ordeal in the van, however, the dilapidated trailer house that would be my new home looked like a piece of heaven. Joel's second wife, Janine, sent bread and honey over to feed us when we all arrived. I changed wet diapers, put blankets on the double bed in my room, bundled all the kids up in sweaters, and put 5 of them to sleep in one bed. I put my 3 boys on a box spring with no mattress off the hall. Immediately, I was summoned to deliver her baby, Janine's baby. After 2 hours of trying to keep my composure, I delivered her baby girl and returned to my trailer. Then, wrapping myself up in a blanket, I flopped onto the bumpy, broke down couch and let tears wash away all the exhaustion, stress, and disappointment I'd kept inside. With no heat in the trailer, I awoke several times during the night to cover chilling kids. Until summer rolled back around, we had to wear sweaters night and day in order to keep warm. We also had a tough time adjusting to the confined quarters, the moist, salty air, and the constant fog blowing in from the ocean 2 miles away. The rains may have been what made our lives the most miserable. Mud was tracked in constantly. My nephew Joseph and his wife, Margarita, lived in a tent next to 2 Mexican friends. Ooh, I'm going to say this wrong. I'm going to spell it. EULOGIO, and Lola, just a few yards outside my front door. During one violent storm, severe winds loosened the stakes and collapsed the tents, leaving canvas and ropes flapping around. All four of the occupants ran to my already overcrowded trailer for cover. With 13 of us now, Lola and Margarita slept on the sofa, while the two men slept on the floor next to the kitchen table. 2 nights later, I awoke from a deep sleep to find Lola in labor. I put Joseph and Margarita to sleep on the floor in the hall next to my frightened kids, while Lola screamed through the rainy night. At 5 a.m., on my ramshackle sofa, I delivered Lola's baby girl. These people lived with us for 6 weeks until they could afford to get a trailer of their own. Sleeping with my 5 kids in the double bed, my legs would get so numb I could hardly move them. I put a small chair beside the bed and stretched my legs out on it until they got so cold I'd have to pull them back in. With no high chair, I had to sit 5-month-old Sandra and 11-month-old Margaret on the small Formica kitchen table to eat. The older kids had to stand beside me to keep them from falling to the floor. With so much mud and dirt constantly being tracked in, the linoleum floor was next to impossible to keep clean. My first big thrill in Baja was the day Verlin brought home a brand new Maytag washer with a gasoline motor for his 5 wives to share. Joel got wind of it, and before long, we were sharing it with several members of the family as well. So they can't have anything for themselves. This man got them in this situation in the first place, and now here they are yet again, and this is crazy. The washer ran from morning till night, with everyone wrangling constantly about who should get it next. Once on my turn to wash, I drew water from the well, carried it over, and filled the washer plus 2 rinse tubs while I sorted out my clothes in my trailer house. Another woman started her wash in my water without so much as a "do you mind?" I couldn't do it, y'all. I couldn't do it. Being used so much, the wringer on the washer soon broke. My wrists ached from constantly wringing out clothes by hand. Then the motor died completely. It was terrible, having to wash out my 2 babies' diapers plus all my other laundry by hand. Then several of the women who helped wear out my washer each got their own, but refused to share. So much for a united order. Why weren't they forced to share? If Joel said that they had to, why didn't they have to? I hadn't slept with or written Verlin for 5 months. I was so mad at him for making me move and for selling my wonderful, if unfurnished, house in the mountains. I fumed further when he told me he felt that Beverly and Esther, his 2 Mexican wives, needed extra time with him. He defended this by reminding me they were new brides and each only 17. To my chagrin, he moved both new wives to live by me in Baja. To make matters worse, he put me on a budget of only $20 a week, saying we should be grateful for that much since he had to help support the church. Somehow we managed. My 2 older boys spent hours fishing for our dinners. When the Gruins were running, we all went out and scooped up buckets full of fish as they washed up on the beach in the waves to lay their eggs. Finally, we had some tasty animal protein in our diet. We scrounged all around us as best as we could to make ends meet. All 5 wives used one old pickup truck to go wherever we had to go. I drive to nearby farms that ship their crops to the United States so I could get their leftovers. Imperfect and unwanted olives, tomatoes, potatoes, and all kinds of veggies. I often distributed my loads to everyone in the colony. See how she's being sharing and giving and all the other stuff, but the other people in the colony aren't. Emotionally, I was falling apart. I knew I couldn't go on this way much longer. I told Verlin I needed a better way of life. I begged him to take me to Las Vegas, to live with him like he did with Charlotte. He refused. He claimed he was saving money by doing it this way, but I knew the truth. all along. He favored Charlotte in a number of ways. I was sick at heart. I went on begging for a little attention, pleading for my needs to be fulfilled, but Verlin couldn't do a single thing for me because, as he said, it would be unfair. I got that response whenever I asked for what I felt I really needed. Each time it spelled nothing but more sacrifice for me. So it's not unfair for Charlotte to keep having her own situation with him, but it's unfair for her to have that for a little bit of time. Got it. I was now 28 years old, and I could see my life was going nowhere. Although the prospect was traumatic, I thought a lot about divorce. According to our religion, I would lose my blessing if I left my husband for no other reason than that he was faithfully living the principle. Even the natural consequences of polygamous life, the poverty, loneliness, and insecurity I come to know so well, were not valid reasons to divorce a husband. Besides, I had no way to support myself, even emotionally. I wasn't prepared to go out into the world alone. Nevertheless, I went many times to Joel, who convinced us all he was a prophet and our ultimate earthly authority, and I asked him to exempt me from the rules. Instead, he changed them. In order to get an official divorce, Joel decreed a wife had to physically and emotionally separate from her husband for at least 6 months. After that, she could marry someone else. But he would have to be of our church in order for her to keep a blessing. In other words, you can get rid of this man, but you still have to marry another one and be stuck in this. So you might as well stick with the man you got. That's what I'm saying. In 1 more month, I would satisfy the time limit, but I begged Joel to give me a divorce immediately. Instead, he took me to Las Vegas himself, hoping to get us reconciled. I held out for 5 days after seeing Verlin because I wanted a few concrete promises before I gave in. I demanded more money, my own washer, a high chair, and at least a front step for my trailer. He swore he'd do so as I asked, but I knew deep down that we'd soon be back in the same rut. I returned home, still distraught and pregnant once again. So she fell for it. She fell for it. Irene, girl, we on page 257. What are we doing? Like, what are we doing? Please, Irene, you're doing so great. Don't be like the other books and leave us with one chapter of you being free. Chapter 27. I look forward to driving all the kids to school in Guerrero, Guerrero? I don't know. Each day, it was my chance to get away and associate with other people while in town. Linda Stanley, who previously lived in Bravo, moved with us out of the mountains and now live near the new Baja colony. I helped Linda with a difficult delivery in the mountains a year earlier. We now loved each other like sisters. Almost every day, she waved me down as I drove by her house, taking the truckload of children to or from school. She would insist that I drop whatever I was doing to spend some time with her. I knew she was lonely with her husband working in San Diego, except when he came home on sporadic weekends, and no one but her 2-month-old and 1-year-old daughters to keep her company most of the time. I was most appreciative of the fudge, brownies, and hot meals she served me whenever I stopped in. I knew no such luxuries. Invariably, though, I had to cut short those visits in order to get home and get to my housework. I also hesitated to impose on Lucy for a minute longer than necessary, since she tended my little ones each day until I returned from town. One morning, after dropping the kids off at school, I was making a mad dash to the outskirts of town to fill 4 butane tanks to take back to Los Molinos. The wives needed the gas to heat water and start their meals. It's like they're camping permanently. As I passed her place, Linda waved, trying to stop me. If I stopped, I knew I would be at least half an hour before I could pull away from her. So I just waved and drove right on by. At my side mirror, after I passed, I could see that she started crying and yelling, waving her arms in despair. Something was wrong. I swung around and drove on the shoulder of the dirt road into her yard. I'd never seen anyone look quite so pathetic. She put her arms around my neck, clinging to me, sobbing, unable to talk. What's the matter, Linda? I asked, thinking she might just be feeling lonely or rejected because I failed to stop. I need to talk to you, she said gravely. It's really important. I followed her into the kitchen and took a chair by the cluttered table of breakfast dishes. Irene, you're the best friend I've ever had. I feel I can confide in you. She sobbed in between words. I'm going to die, she wailed. She picked up a notebook and handing it to me. In here, I have written down all my funeral arrangements, my wishes concerning my burial. I want you to promise me that you'll carry them out. Oh, come on, Linda. I think it's just those postpartum blues. Come on, get your kids ready. Get some diapers and a couple of changes of clothes. When I pick up the kids after school, I'll drop by and take you home with me. All you need is a change of scenery. She hung on to me and sobbed. Irene, it's not the baby blues. I've had a premonition that I'm going to die. I shook my head, but not wanting to offend her, I asked, what's wrong with you? Are you sick? Do you have any symptoms? No. I woke up at 2 a.m. with this premonition that I should write things down in a book and make funeral preparations. I assured her I'd be back after school was out. My heart ached for her. I'd have the baby blues many times, feeling as if I were going to die, but I knew it would soon pass. This makes me wonder because I know sometimes people do kind of get that feeling like something's going to happen, but we'll see how this plays out. Promising to return for her, I left to make preparations for her visit. There was no way I could repay Linda for all her special kindness to me, but at least I would try. I baked a German chocolate cake from a mix she'd given me the day before. I also made a big potato salad. Then I hurried like mad to finish my wash. After completing my errands, I picked up Linda and her babies when I went to collect the children at school. You had time to make that cake for me? She asked me, clearly touched. She seemed excited to be with us for supper, and I could tell she looked forward to the opportunity to chat alone with me later that night. We threw clean sheets on the old outstretched sofa. Soon, Linda's 2 little girls and my own 8 kids were settled down for the night. Linda talked long into the night about her teenage years in Florida, about her marriage to Chuck. She told me all about meeting him, painting quite an interesting love story. Then she got around to the premonition she had the night before. I was exhausted, but she begged me to stay up with her. She needed me to console her, but mostly she wanted to tell me the intimate details of her life which she insisted was coming to an end. I confided in her that I was expecting again. I haven't even told Verlin, but I wanted her to know. She told me I could have all her maternity clothes. At 4 a.m., I made her lie down and try to rest because I desperately needed sleep before my kids got up. I'd have to fix them breakfast and take them along with the rest of Verlin's kids into town for school. I eased myself onto the sliver of my bed alongside 5 of my sleeping children, and I pulled the chair into place for my feet. I was instantly out. Irene! Irene! Linda's cries woke me up. I made my way groggily down the dark hall, lighting a kerosene lamp on the table beside her. I could tell by her cries she was in real pain. It was only 5:15. How could something have happened so quickly? Linda was holding her hand over her left breast, sobbing. Irene, Irene, I've never had such pain in all my life. Maybe your breast is caked, I said. Are you sure you've been nursing your baby on that side? Yes, I'm sure. I've never been sore like this. I know the baby has nursed just fine. Holding the lamp close to her breast, I could see it was inflamed. I heated water on the gas stove, then dipped a washcloth in the hot water, wrung it out, and gently fanned it in the air until it cooled enough to be put on her breast. This should make it feel better. She got some relief and quit her moaning as I continued the hot packing, but neither of us slept anymore. I promised to take her with me to see the doctor as soon as the kids were up and ready for school. Dr. Cortez shook his head. We need to give her antibiotics every 4 hours. Can you continue the hot packs? He asked. An abscess is forming. The heat will help draw out the inflammation. Do you have someone who can give her the shots if I let her go home with you? I will, I promise. I'll make sure she gets them on time. We later dropped by Linda's house, and I picked up all her dirty clothes. I offered to wash for her so she and her kids would have enough change of clothes to last for 3 or 4 days. Irene, you're like a mother to me. I love you so much. I hope I'm not being too big of a burden. Of course not. That's what friends are for. I'm happy to help you. Just lie down and relax. I'll take care of your baby so you can have complete rest. The next morning, Linda's breasts swollen even worse. The pain was becoming unbearable. I kept Donna out of school to stay with Linda and the small children while I drove to town, dropped the kids off, and then went to persuade Dr. Cortez to come to my trailer house to check on my friend. At the hospital, I watched as he rummaged through his medicines. He brought 6 more shots plus some painkillers, hoping things weren't quite as bad as I described. As soon as Dr. Cortez saw Linda, he administered the painkiller. He said he'd never seen an abscess so large. Then he added, her breast is filling with pus. You must continue to give her these shots and painkillers. Oh, this is going to be bad. Bring her to the hospital tomorrow afternoon. If it's not improving, I'll have to operate. A lancing should correct the problem. The following day, Linda wasn't too much paid to ride along with the truckload of kids, so I brought all home from school first. I left Donna in charge of the children until we returned. Dr. Cortez took one look and said, I'm very concerned. We'll have to operate immediately. I'll go get the room ready. Linda put her head down on his desk and started sobbing. Irene, I want you to tell the doctor that the only way I'll consent to do this is if he'll let you be with me every minute. I don't want to die alone. I put my arms around her shoulders. Linda, if you're really that worried, let's get you out to San Diego where you can be with your husband and go to a hospital that can give you the best of care. No, I just want to get the operation over with. I can't impose on Chuck now. My only regret is that he doesn't have another wife to comfort him when I'm gone. The doctor returned to Linda while she was crying. He asked me in Spanish why she was so upset. I was embarrassed to answer him because I thought Linda was just paranoid and overreacting. Still, I explained to him that she wanted me to be with her for the operation because she thought she was going to die and she didn't want to die alone. That's like, it's the wrong way to go into an operation. But her fears are warranted, especially if she had that type of premonition. You can be with her, but tell her it's a simple operation. It will be over in no time. He then led us both into the operating room. I helped Linda remove her clothes and put on a white gown that tied in the front. The doctor had me put on some green pants, a shirt, coverings for my shoes, and a green cap. Then he tied a gauze mask around my nose and mouth. We helped Linda onto the operating table, and a Mexican nurse untied the strings on her gown, letting it fall down at her sides. The nurse then painted Linda's whole breast area clear down to her navel with disinfectant. Tearfully, Linda grabbed onto my hand. Irene, promise me you won't leave me. Promise. I patted her hand, holding it firmly, hoping to put her at ease. Don't worry, I'll be here every minute. I promise I won't leave you. You'll soon wake up and I'll be holding your hand. The doctor motioned for silence as the nurse prepared to administer the anesthesia. Y'all, I don't know why I'm crying already. I just have a bad feeling. Wanting to say one more thing, Linda wouldn't let the nurse cover her nose and mouth. Oh, Irene, it's so comforting to die with your best friend by your side. Tell Chuck I love him. In the next moment, I felt her grip loosen as her body relaxed. The nurse turned up the fumes and she motioned the flow through the gauge. As she monitored the flow through the gauge, nodding her approval that all is well. The doctor began the operation. I swallowed hard, gritting my teeth as I watched him cut Linda's left breast from the base halfway to her nipple. Immediately, he and the nurse were mopping up thick yellow pus. Dr. Cortez's gaze met mine as he checked for my reaction. He pressed gently on her breast again, forcing more of the nasty gook into a special container. He must have extracted at least a pint. Linda thrashed around. One leg almost fell off the table. I quickly pushed it back, holding it in place as the doctor proceeded. She moaned and then she thrashed again. Is she feeling this? Why is she thrashing? The doctor paused as we watched, waiting for her to calm down. Her chest rose and fell up and down, then stopped. Doctor, she's dead? I exclaimed. Do something. Oh, she's dead. The young nurse removed the mask from Linda's face as the doctor forced her chest up and down with his strong hands. With a telltale, frantic look in his eyes, he kept trying again and again, all in vain. I begged him, can't you give her a shot in the heart? I've heard of that saving people. Anything, doctor, please. I watched with frozen anxiety as he tried one final time. He injected some liquid into her heart with the extra long needle. I stood by helplessly, watching in silence. I was praying to God that what I was witnessing wasn't really true. I'm sorry, the doctor said. There is nothing more I can do. She's dead. I fought back emotion as tears welled up in my eyes. I had to carry on. I found the nearest phone and called San Diego. Chuck wasn't available, so I left a message with his friend. Then I forced myself to drive to Linda's house to get her clothes so I could return to the hospital and dress her for burial. The notebook Linda showed me 3 days earlier was still lying there on the kitchen table. I opened it and read the instructions for her funeral. I went down the list and found every article, even her favorite beads, nylons, and breast dress shoes. When I got back to the hospital, her body was still on the operating table. The nurse helped me dress it. She was only in her 20s. I finally made it back to my crowded trailer house to find that Linda's infant was refusing to take a bottle. She was carrying her head off, expecting her mother to come nurse her. She was crying her head off, expecting her mom to come nurse her. That was more than I could stand. I tooted both her little babies around in my arms, sobbing my heart out. Life was hard enough, but being without a mother was the saddest thing I could imagine. After much coaxing and cuddling, the baby took a bottle and fell asleep. I left Donna in charge of all 9 kids again, and I drove back to the hospital to be by Linda until someone could arrive with the casket so we could take her home. Everyone had left the hospital except for the doctor and the nurse who waited for me to return. They now took their leave. I began my lonely wake. The generator automatically shut off at 11 p.m. sharp, which soon left me in the dark. I lit the kerosene lamp and turned it down low as I nervously reclined on the nurse's cot in a small room adjacent to the operating room. I could still see the remnants of my friend through the door. The remains of my friend through the door. Nervous and alone, I couldn't sleep. The whole past few days seemed so unreal. Linda never knew I secretly envied her life. Although she and Chuck plan on entering into the principal at some point in the future, at the time of her death, she had a husband to herself, a cozy house for just them and their girls. She was the first woman I knew who actually had a checkbook. She used her own judgment, spending her money freely on things she considered necessities. To me, many of them were luxuries. She'd buy cold cereal, lunch meat, crackers, mayonnaise, tuna, and chocolate. I could go on forever with the list. I tried not to compare, but my children ate boiled wheat and ground corn for breakfast. Every day my boys used hand-turned grinder to turn whole corns of wheat into flour and hot cereal. Pinto beans and bread were our main staple. I was lucky when I could afford rice or potatoes to serve along with the beans. Occasionally, I splurged and brought margarine. The flickering lamp released fumes from the kerosene into the eerie, partial darkness. It brought back memories of my night with little Leia. She'd been just as cold, stiff, and lifeless as Linda was now. During those 6 hours of contemplation, I think I surrendered my desires for worldly comforts. What I really envied was Linda's departure. Wherever she'd gone, it was far away from this harsh world. Here was a woman who'd been granted an ease out. I became convinced that the only way to freedom was death. Ooh-wee. Oh, y'all, ooh, this is extra long. Y'all gonna be mad at me. I don't want to leave y'all like that, but this next chapter seems like it's extra long. It is extra long. Good, great. Okay, I'm not going to do y'all like that. So for those of you who want a break, take a break at 35 minutes. For those of you who want more, I'm going to give you more. Y'all know I love you guys. That's why. Because I don't feel right only giving you 30 minutes. Chapter 28. Life was chaotic for all of us. Verlin managed to come home on a few weekends and some holidays. When he did, he was lucky if he spent 2 nights home, and all 5 of us were upset. And okay, let me do this all over again. When he did, he was lucky if he spent 2 nights home, and all 5 of us were upset. We were all dying for love and companionship, but only 2 of us got his attention while the other 3 waited for their turn to come around next time. We were lucky if we each spent 2 nights with him a month. Verlin soon realized his troubles had compounded, so he decided to move Beverly and Esther to the States and set them up as live-in maids, earning enough to support themselves. He moved Charlotte, Lucy, and me to Ensenada, Ensenada, which was halfway between Los Leños and San Diego. He found a big green 2-story house that had been part of a motel complex. Charlotte and Lucy got the place by themselves until I recuperated from my recent confinement after delivering Connie, my 9th child. Connie was born on June 14th, 1966, in the same clinic where my friend Linda died. When my baby was 2 weeks old, I moved into that overcrowded house in Ensenada. I don't think I'm saying that right. I'm gonna have to look that up. Making a total of 25 people living under one roof. Understanding this was to be a temporary arrangement until we could afford separate rooms. We all tried to love one another and do the best we could under such crowded circumstances. Verlin's paychecks not only went to support us, but they had to cover his rent and living expenses in San Diego, monthly payments on a truck, and the assistance he gave Joel on the newly acquired land in Baja. As always, his earnings fell short. He shouldn't have to pay Joel if they're not living there. I'm just saying. When Verlin arrived on December 23rd, he was determined to make this the best Christmas ever. He told me how he showered praises on Beverly for sacrificing $15 of her hard-earned money so he could buy presents for his kids. Our spirits were high. We could really surprise the unsuspecting brood. The oldest child was only 15. We knew we'd have to really stretch that money to get something for each of the 21 kids, but somehow we succeeded. I was the lucky one who accompanied Verlin into town, and he warned me several times to be certain to not forget any of Charlotte's little girls. Make sure we don't forget anyone, he commanded. I looked longingly at all the boxes of games, beautiful dolls, tea sets, and other expensive toys, dreaming that we were rich enough to afford them. I realized that they were all out of the question when Verlin called me to come down the next aisle. I joined him in the party favor section, where the small toys and balls were. Verlin excitedly grabbed several different small rubber-colored balls. He put them in the cart. I got 3 sets of jackets for the 3 older girls. Verlin mentally summed up the prices as I continued carefully choosing each child's gift. Let's see now. We began checking it out. We have 3 sets of jackets, 8 balls, and these lovely dominoes for the older 3 boys to share. I wonder if there will be too many fights, he questioned. But at their age, they deserve something nice. That will do for 15 of them. Hey, these plastic whistles are on sale, he said excitedly as he grabbed 5 different colors, examining their quality. Put those back, please, Verlin. It's bad enough having 20. Yeah, I was just thinking, plastic whistles, let's not get any loud toys. It's bad enough having 25 of us in the house when we're all quiet, let alone with children blowing whistles. No, he insisted, they'll love them. That's it. Let's get the rest of the kids' balloons. Yeah, they'll love them, and you're not there to hear it. We watched the register closely, adding up each item, making sure we didn't go over the designated amount. Verlin was jubilant as he walked out carrying our treasures. Boy, will the kids ever be surprised. We stopped at a fruit stand on the side of the road. Verlin talked the owner into giving him credit for 2 weeks. He went wild. His kids would have the best Christmas yet. He got 5 kilos of peanuts, a box of oranges, plus a crate of bananas. His eyes danced when he selected 3 bags of candy. Regretfully, he bought a big bag of colored bubblegum. God must really be on our side, he smiled. Look, they even have brown paper bags here. We can put the toys plus some goodies in them so each child will have their own individual present. When we got home, Lucy kept the excited bunch of kids behind a locked door just long enough for the gifts to be hid in my bedroom. The day before Christmas was especially busy with preparations. The children worked in teams doing their chores extra carefully, along with everything else. I tripled the recipe for bread. Cinnamon rolls were an extravagance, but tomorrow the family would have their fill. By evening, I could see in all those little dancing eyes that it would be a sin to make them wait until tomorrow, so I gave in. They could celebrate tonight, but only 1 frosted cinnamon roll apiece. The older ones begged me to give them hints. Please, Auntie, what did Daddy buy for us? They asked. I insisted they start their baths early and go to bed, and they'll be ready bright and early for Santa Claus. After they went to bed, we set to preparing the gifts. Following Verlin's instructions, I took a black marker and wrote the kids' names on the sacks, starting with Charlotte's children. I wrote her name on top of the first bag and the name of each of her children on their own bag. There would be a Christmas bag for everyone. Verlin impatiently grabbed the first ones as he said, keep marking more as we fill them up. Charlotte and I will distribute the peanuts and fruit. Lucy, you count out the candy so it will be divided equally. I handed over Lucy's children's sacks, all marked. Verlin checked over each name to make sure the count was right. That's great. Now hurry up with yours, Irene. Mark them and start helping us. When mine were all done, I opened them up myself and started filling them with peanuts and the allotted fruit, 1 orange and 1 banana each. It's crazy that fruit is considered a gift. I hope my son, I'm going to mark this. I'm going to put a little thing here. Page 268, son. I hope my son hears this because these kids are excited about fruit. That's how much poverty they're in. I'll never forget how happy we were all together, switching a toy from one sack to another, each wife making sure her kids got their fair share. Verlin had the final say on what he thought was best for each child. How nice, he commented with satisfaction. Each has a gift in their sack except for us adults. We carried the bags into my room, pushing them close together to form 2 long lines, all ready to be distributed tomorrow. We were jubilant. It seemed God had worked things out. There were even enough goodies for the adults. On Christmas morning, I could hear little children giggling and whispering at my bedroom door. Go get dressed, I commanded. Tell your mommies to get your hair done, then we'll have our Christmas. Was there ever commotion in the house? Kids hunting shoes, older ones dressing their younger brothers and sisters. Verlin was doing final details. He washed little faces and wiped away a few runny noses. With all the eager anticipation, it was no easy task. We finally got all 21 kids quietly kneeling in a circle for prayer. Verlin thanked God for the occasion we were celebrating, for his wonderful family, and for the many blessings we enjoyed. The amen seemed to zap little bodies into a jumping, scampering beeline to the presents. Verlin calmed the children down. Just be quiet and stand in line. He looked pleased to see them so excited. Now, when Daddy calls your name, come and get your sack. Be quiet until your name is called, understand? Charlotte and I passed sack to Lucy, who in turn handed them to Verlin. Their names weren't in any particular order, but he began. Loretta, Pierre, Beth, Verla, Norman, Connie. He turned to me. Irene, this is for your baby Connie. Make sure she doesn't choke on the peanuts. My little 5-year-old Kaylin couldn't stand the suspense a minute longer. Daddy, he yelled above the commotion. Where's mine? Be quiet, son. Wait your turn. It's coming. Mark, Andre, Chad, Sandra, Margaret. Kaylin got more upset. I'm littler than those big kids, he whined. Where's mine? Verlin wanted obedience, so he grabbed Kaylin, shaking him a couple times. Now be quiet, or you won't get one. He continued handing out the bags. He was having the time of his life. It was fun to watch him. He got the biggest thrill seeing those little kids' faces light up with joy. He continued. Verlin M., Laura, Donna, Rhea, Brent. Kaylin lost his patience. He was more frightened of being left out than getting punished. Daddy, you're forgetting me. Verlin stopped, looking firm. He repeated, Kaylin, I told you if you do not behave, you won't get one. He passed out more sacks. Byron, Susan, Stephen, Barbara, Noreen. With each additional sack, Kaylin sank deeper into despair. Seeing tears forming in his eyes, Verlin finally gave in. He turned to me. Give me Kaylin's sack. He's been a good boy to wait this long. Before I could read the names, I counted the remaining sacks. 1, 2, 3, 4. I got sick. They forgot the little boy. I got sicker with each count. There should have been 5. I checked each sack, reading names out loud. Lucy, Charlotte, Irene, Daddy. I couldn't believe it. I left out my own kid. Verlin was crushed. He only wanted to teach Kaylin to be patient and obedient. He didn't want Kaylin to know that he really been forgotten, so he grabbed his own sack, hoping Kaylin wouldn't notice. Hugging him close to make up for the oversight, he thrust his own bag into Kaylin's expecting hands. Kaylin quickly opened the sack, rummaging around to find his toy. He looked up disgustingly at us. Where's my toy? He demanded tearfully. He looked accusingly at Verlin, pointed to the writing on the sack, and said, Daddy. You know that's not my name. We were sick with guilt. Poor little Kaylin was absolutely brokenhearted. I thought we succeeded in stretching the $15, but we hadn't stretched it quite far enough. Roland promised Kaylin that as soon as we could afford it, he would buy him his own special toy. But many a Christmas has come and gone, and Kaylin swears he's still waiting. Can you imagine being a little kid and everybody else around you is getting gifts and you don't get anything? Ooh, Kaylin. Soon our stay together in the big greenhouse seemed more permanent than temporary. Living conditions became more and more intolerable, with the 3 of us wives having to deal with each other, as well as our combined 21 children who were constantly underfoot. School for the older children, plus an occasional outing at the beach for all of them, were about the only outings for the kids' unrelenting energies. Lucy, Charlotte, and I did well at avoiding major fights, but the air was thick with feelings. Verlin's absence became the norm. Most recently, he'd gone off on a 3-month mission trip to persuade polygamists living in Canada to come down and join Joel's church. Why? So they could be broke and struggling like them? He arrived home from that trip with nothing to offer his impoverished families. We've been sustaining on donations from the church storehouse, but we somehow scrounged up enough to celebrate his homecoming. It was Lucy's night to sleep with him. Her bedroom was upstairs, directly over Charlotte's. Mine was upstairs too, across and down the hall from Lucy's. I cunningly cleaned up my room nicely and offered to let Verlin and Lucy sleep there. I insisted that Lucy let me take her baby to 10 along with mine, and I sleep in her room. They were both pleased that I could be so thoughtful by giving them the night alone. I made sure the babies were asleep. Then I lay on my stomach and rhythmically bounced the bed for all I was worth. She made her think that was them. I was laughing so hard I had to smother my face in the pillow. I waited 5 minutes and then continued to bounce. Waited and then continued. The next morning, Charlotte was in the kitchen when Verlin came downstairs in a chipper mood. He tried to kiss her good morning, but she flipped her head and refused to accept any of his attentions. What's wrong with you? You know darn well what's wrong. I refuse to live another day in this house. Verlin was baffled. What on earth are you talking about? She blurted out, I heard you, and I can't believe it. Heard what? I think it was terrible that I had to listen to you and Lucy make love. How could you have heard anything? We didn't even sleep in her room, he said defensively. Don't lie to me. I heard you. Her sobs grew louder. I will not tolerate living here another day. Verlin rushed upstairs to consult with me. Boy, does Charlotte have an imagination, he said. She's so upset. She says she's moving out for sure. What do you think is her problem? I let him talk on and on, fretting about it, until I couldn't restrain myself any longer. I threw myself on Lucy's bed, laughing uncontrollably. Then I bounced the bed up and down, cluing him in on my prank. He pointed at me in disbelief. You didn't. I was laughing so hard I could barely squeak it out. Yes, I did. She's about to be in trouble. She's about to be in trouble because Charlotte is his precious wife. And yeah. Why on earth would you do this to her? Still giggling, I ventured. I guess I wanted her to think we were getting more than she was. For a short time, we all benefited from my fun. True to her word, Charlotte did move out. She rented a brick house a few blocks away. Verlin decided he couldn't afford the rent on that house and the greenhouse as well, so Lucy moved into a trailer house nearby, and I rented a small 4-room cinder block house next to the winery called La Venta for $35 a month. Oh, what I would give. This was the 11th time I've moved in 13 years. That's ridiculous. Because my house had a convenient cement slab for carpet, Verlin moved a small camper trailer onto it for a pregnant Beverly. She cooked in my house, but she slept in her little trailer. Esther moved back to Los Molinos. Although Beverly and Esther both lost their first babies at birth, the number of Verlin's offspring reached 29. He put each wife on a strict budget. He supplemented with clothes and shoes from the secondhand stores, most of which was given to him because it was so torn, stained, dirty, or simply out of style. No one would pay for it. We still ground wheat for bread and cereal on a hand grinder. Each wife was more or less left to fend for herself, with rarely more than was needed to cover necessities. One weekend, when Verlin was able to come home from Vegas, he arrived to find my 2-year-old, Connie, deathly ill. Her eyes would roll back in her head as she lay clammy and barely moving. My usual home remedies and prayers brought about no marked improvement. I knew if we didn't get professional help immediately, we'd lose her. She was near death when we arrived at the government hospital in Ensenada. Dr. Martinez, the attending physician, diagnosed her as having pneumonia and gave us little hope for recovery. Once she was admitted, Verlin was in a hurry to leave because he had only 11 hours to get back to Vegas in time for work. I was frantic. He was about to leave me there alone, and I felt emotionally incapable of dealing with this situation. Not even in an emergency could Verlin find time to be with me. Anxiously, I pled with him to stay longer, at least until we knew she'd be all right. Verlin tried to hush me, ordering me to dry my tears. He left, angry I made such a scene in front of the doctor. In my own desperate way, I tried to understand. Was it utterly unrealistic for him to take off work each time one of his neglected wives or children got sick? No, this isn't a regular sickness, though. I don't expect him to take off work if they have a common cold. This is pneumonia, and they don't know whether she's going to make it or not. But then again, what can you do? Because y'all don't have no money. I'd endured 6 of my baby's births without him. God, I prayed, why can't my child's own father be here to comfort us in such an uncertain time? I should have been strong, able to bear whatever was necessary, but my heart was wrenched seeing my precious child so ill. I was sick with apprehension, lest God decide to snatch her away from me as he had done with Leah. Tiptoeing into the ward, I found Connie strapped into an iron crib. Despite all the other children in the room who were crying, Connie appeared to be sleeping. I watched the glucose drip into my beautiful child's arms. Please, God, watch over her. Please let her recover. I had no alternative but to leave her in the doctor's care while I caught a bus and sadly returned home to my other duties. So she's all by herself. It was Sunday, and there was a great deal to be done before school the next day. While Connie was in the hospital, I rode 6 miles into town on the bus every day to check on her. I was only allowed short visits. I see her screaming, begging for me. I pleaded with the nurses to let me untie her so I could hold her, but they refused. It was so hard for both of us. The 2-week ordeal seemed like it lasted forever. Dr. Martinez cared for my baby and kindly befriended me. I'm sure some of it was pity, especially when he met Lucy and learned Verlin had a string of wives. My guilt mounted as quickly as the hospital bill increased. I knew we were spending precious money the whole family desperately needed. Everyone had to cut back whenever there was an emergency. Verlin sent $400 of tithing money from the church coffers to make a down payment on the bill, promising he'd pay the balance as soon as he could. Dr. Martinez called me into the office. He told me to go get the file paper from the pediatrics and take it down to the corridor to the cashier. I had to settle the bill before he could sign Connie's release so I could take her home. I watched as the nurse stamped a couple of forms, then handed the original to me. That will be $75, she said matter-of-factly. I was shocked. Thinking I misunderstood, I asked, $75? No, it's 75 pesos. That was $6 at the time. I paid her, knowing there had been some grave mistake. I returned to Dr. Martinez's office, hoping he could rectify the matter. But when I tried to explain, he put his arm around my shoulder and said, Senora, I worked things out, so all you have to pay was a minimum that the government hospital requires. All my services are free. Tell your husband to take you on a long overdue vacation with the money. Tell him it's my prescription for you. That was so sweet of him. That was so sweet of him. That he saw that she couldn't stay, that he saw what a sacrifice she was making, that he saw that she was coming up there every day to be with her baby as much as she could. There are still good people out here, y'all. My house was unheated, except for what warmth came from the gas range in the kitchen. The doctor refused to let me take Connie back there because he knew the conditions wouldn't be conducive for her recovery. A friend, Julian Hoffen, insisted I stay 2 weeks with her while Connie regained her weight and the color returned to her cheeks. I don't know what I'd done without kind friends like Julian, who seemed to appear in many of my darkest hours. We could plainly see, her child got sick because of the living conditions. That's what we can plainly see, but that's the book is on we can plainly see, but that's why her child got sick. We could plainly see we never get ahead financially by paying rent, especially on several houses. So Verlin purchased a lot around the corner from my small house. With the help of his older boys and a couple of wives, he started building a home large enough for several of us to live together. We called it the Big Brown House. In the meantime, Lucy's heater caught fire and her trailer burned to the ground, destroying everything she owned. No one was hurt, but she had to move into the big brown house before it was completely finished. Charlotte had no sooner set up her living quarters with Lucy when Verlin moved me in also. Beverly's trailer was set up behind the house. We were thrilled to have hot water and never thought to complain that we only had one bathroom. Around the walls of the dining area, Verlin built a one-piece bar that served as a table. He also built long wooden benches so all the kids could sit down at once to eat. We three wives took turns doing the cooking. For breakfast, the three oldest girls, Rhea, Donna, and Laura, held plates over the stove while I rationed out the food, making sure everyone got his or her share. The girls then served a plate to each child. It was a riot. I often made hot cakes for all 30 of us. I found that it was easier to make each person one large pancake the size of the frying pan. That way no one came back for seconds, and it kept the confusion down. Even in those strange circumstances, I believe we needed to live a little because, well, we couldn't postpone happiness forever. Once I got the ice cream vendor who made the daily rounds through our neighborhood to give me credit until the next weekend. Verlin paid for the 26 popsicles when he returned home, but he was disgusted with me when he found out I was spending money unwisely. I ignored his reprimand because we didn't have many other joys. The squeals of excitement from all the kids made it worthwhile. I found a way to buy a large pan full of popsicles at least once a week. They only cost 20 centavos each, so we continued the ritual without mentioning it to Verlin. With only the one bathroom in the house, Verlin set up the faithful old outhouse in the backyard. There were so many of us using it that he knew it would fill up fast, so he made the hole extra deep. It was already halfway full when I stepped into it one day, big and pregnant with my 10th child. My 2-year-old Connie stepped in beside me with no warning. The floorboard gave way and down we went. Before I could grab her, she fell right into the awful cesspool. One of my legs went through also, but my stomach saved the rest of me from flying through the hole in the floor. I screamed bloody murder. 6 of the boys were just outside the outhouse playing marbles. They came running with Lucy and Charlotte close behind to see what the screaming was about. They helped me out, but Connie was up in it to her armpits. They tipped the toilet house on its side, and before 11-year-old Chad knew what was happening to him, Charlotte and I shoved him screaming headfirst into the hole. We were holding onto his feet, shouting for him to grab Connie before she was completely under. Chad was terrified that we would drop him in there with her. He didn't even want to touch her, but we forced him to reach down through the filthy slush and grab hold of her arms. Sorry. Within a few seconds, we drew the... y'all, this is jacking me up. She's too visual. I'm picturing it. Y'all, I used to go camping, and those porta potties, and okay, so he's bending down to get her out the hole. Within a few seconds, we drew them both up out of the stinky hole. I sprayed both Connie and me off with the hose. Then I put her in a tub of water and scrubbed her with soap, vinegar, pine sol, and even Purex. Nothing seemed to eliminate the awful odor. Oh, Jesus. I finally had to cut her hair off. That was the only way I could get the nauseous smell off of her. She'd been a world-class thumbsucker before our outhouse incident, but now she would smell her thumb and just cry. She gave that habit up real quick. We made sure not to dig a hole that deep again, but Connie's continual fear of falling in drove her to use the inside bathroom faithfully. I told her that whether or not any of the other kids wanted to believe it, she really was the cutest little stinker I ever had. Y'all, this is too much. And this is a long reading. This is too much. Charlotte got a job teaching school in San Diego. Lucy and I were left to tend all the children, including Charlotte's 8 in the big brown house. Excuse me. One day while washing clothes outside, I suddenly heard screaming coming from the house. I opened the door and saw Lucy whipping Mark with a belt. Not wanting to question her authority over the kids, I said nothing. I couldn't imagine what they'd done to deserve it, but from what I could tell, everyone in eyesight was going to get it before Lucy was finished. 12-year-old Susan was Lucy's next victim. Charlotte's daughter, Suzanne, was the sweetest and most timid of all the kids. I couldn't stand there and watch Lucy whip her. Not wanting any trouble between us, I grabbed Susan away from Lucy, stating, "If she deserves to be whipped, then I'll do it, and I'll do it good." I pulled the frightened girl into the closet bedroom and locked the door. Susan started to cry. I whispered to her, "Keep it up," screaming loud and carrying on each time as the belt hits the bed. I lashed the bed and yelled out, "Don't you ever do it again." Then I motioned for her to scream louder. That's how she got the whipping of her life. My pretend violence scared Lucy so bad, she either forgot or decided not to punish the 3 remaining culprits for whatever they done. Years later, Suzanne admitted to her mother that I hadn't really whipped her. She loved me even more because I came to her rescue. Before long, Lucy also got a job as a nanny in the States. She and Charlotte were only home occasionally for a few days here and there, usually just for a weekend, which means she's probably the one caring for the children. Irene's caring for all the kids. During this time, Verlin added on to the big brown house so Beverly could move out of her trailer. Esther was still in Los Molinos. Meanwhile, I inherited all the parenting responsibility for Verlin's 25 children living in that 4-bedroom house. I had to send 15 kids to school every morning. They all wore uniforms. I had to keep washed and ironed. 4 babies were in diapers, and we couldn't think of buying disposables. I pre-washed all the stinky diapers by hand so they could be washed a second time in the Maytag wringer washer, which ran continually. The older boys always filled the washer and the rinse tubs with water before they left for school. The older girls made beds, swept the floors, and dressed the younger kids while I made breakfast and braided 9 heads of hair. It was pandemonium getting them all out of their house on time. I had to bake 12 loaves of whole wheat bread for every other day. I cleaned, served, washed dishes, ironed, and cooked for the whole crowd, plus the many visitors who always seemed to be on hand. Church members dropped in unannounced several times a week on their way to Los Molinos because our house was the halfway point. The little kids and babies cried for their own mothers. I cried with them at night from sheer exhaustion. I tried hard not to complain about my job. I told myself God required it of me and would bless me for it, for his glory and for our future kingdom. I was raising these children born under the covenant. My reward would surely be great. To that end, and with Dr. Cortez's help, the stork brought me a 10-pound baby on November 7th, 1967. Verlin named him Lascelles after an old friend of his. It all happened so fast. I barely had time to summon the doctor. There went another $35 and still no vacation from my dormitory duties. Now I had a newborn to care for, too. My heart longed for Verlin, especially when I'd get the blues. But I'll remind myself how hard he was slaving away with the paintbrush into the 90 to 100 degree Las Vegas heat just to clothe and feed his kids and contribute to the Lord's great cause. The burden was too great for him to bear alone. Like my Mormon pioneer ancestors, I squared my shoulders and pushed onward. Verlin didn't have much to give me physically or emotionally, but he did praise me and he needed me. I could see that. I was gifted with being fast, organized, and able to multitask. I knew we were living through the toughest years. The boys would soon be old enough to go to work and help support their brothers and sisters. Until then, I could just let Verlin down. Until I just couldn't let Verlin down. I too would work for the cause and strive for heavenly glory. There was certainly none to be had on earth. I also worked hard so Verlin would love me more, as he frequently promised. As much as ever, I wanted to be his favorite. In June 1967, my brother Douglas, who lived in Victor, Montana, decided to surprise me. He brought Mother along with his wife and 10 kids to pay us a visit. All he had which to locate us was a post office box number in Ensenada. When he inquired there, the postal clerk didn't know any more about us than Douglas did, so Douglas set out to find us on his own. He knew we lived about 6 miles outside of Ensenada, so he searched every beach, every housing area within the distance, hoping to locate us. This was only Mother's second trip to Mexico to see me in 14 years. They were disappointed when they couldn't find us after driving all the way from Montana. But even after 2 days of looking, Doug wasn't ready to give up. He traveled south of Ensenada to the Chapultepec area. I don't think I'm saying that right. Chapultepec, asking everyone who could understand English if they heard of us or knew our whereabouts. At 5 p.m. on the third day, he decided to give up the search and go home. Mother broke down crying, so Doug drove west to check one final beach. As they were past the big winery, Doug spotted 2 blonde-headed boys trying to ride a burro. He stopped the van and yelled, "Do you boys speak English?" "Yes," they answered, jumping off and leading the burro toward the van. As they approached, Doug turned to the mother and pointed to the tallest boy. "That's gotta be Irene's kid. He looks just like I did when I was growing up." Then he asked them, "Do you kids know an Irene LeBaron?" Andre, the taller one, answered silently, "Sure, she's my mother." "Well, I'm your Uncle Doug, your mom's brother. Get in with us and show us where you live." A few minutes later, the blue van pulled into the yard. Andre jumped out ahead of everyone, shouting into the house, "Mom, Grandma's here." When I looked out the open door and saw my mother, now frail form, I was astonished and grieved. She was an old woman. Her once beautiful features were faded and wrinkled. She changed drastically in the 7 years since I seen her last, but in a few moments we were in each other's arms, weeping and rejoicing that we were together again. I was so very glad to finally see a part of my family again. I longed for them deeply throughout the years, but my circumstances made it impossible for me to see them except on rare occasion. Even when I got to, there was so much I couldn't tell them. On this visit, we spent 5 wonderful days trying to catch up on years of experiences. At one point, when Mother and I were alone, she laughed onto the topic I'd so long dreaded discussing with her. "I'm glad you at least have electricity," she said sadly. "I was worried that you'd be scrubbing on a board." Well, she did. How thankful I was that I now had a Maytag washer. How do you stand the constant noise from all the children, Irene? Have you been able to make it through all of this? The grief on her face made her look even older. I told her the sort of little lie all good daughters tell their mothers about their most egregious mistakes. "Don't worry, Mom," I assured her. "It's only made me stronger." And that's how I'm going to end it. This was long. I ain't going to do that again. Don't expect that on Friday. I just did that today because I couldn't leave y'all with that short of a read. Y'all tell me what you thought of this one. What I want to know is, because like her friend that passed, what happened with that? Like, why did she pass? Based on what I read, if you know, put it down below. Also want to know, like, what happened to her kids and to her husband, Chad? Like, how do we go about this? Y'all tell me what you thought of this chapter. Until next time.